Okay, so welcome back now. This is the 6th video, right? Okay, to the OSDC course. And we were talking about GitHub Actions. And I realized that my slides are not really up to date, so I'll have to update them so I can use also the slides in order to show source code. But let's get back to this with another example. So GitHub Actions. So there are a couple of versions things here, but I think that could be one of the interesting ones here. So do you use Postgres, or do you use Redis or Solr?
Postgres, yeah.
Okay, let's do with Postgres. Okay, so here's an example with Postgres, and I see I haven't committed everything here, so we'll see what's going on. So let's say you have a project that in that project you also need Postgres. Okay, so you have some source code and you'd like to run the source code, and you need a Postgres server to test it with. Okay, so you can do this in GitHub Actions as well. The way to do this, so actually there are two ways to run tests, or two ways to run on what platforms to run. One that we saw earlier, that you define that the runs on is either Ubuntu or Windows or Mac OS, and then you run basically natively on that operating system. Another way is that you define that the runs on is Ubuntu, but then you use some container, and then you run actually in that container, and the Docker container. Okay, so you can use natively on one of these operating systems, or you can use a Docker container. And in this specific example, I'm using a Docker container. So here is what my source code runs on. Okay, my source code runs on Ubuntu latest, but inside there I'm using a container specifically called Ubuntu 2010. Do you know? Actually, I don't know. I haven't covered Docker, so I assume here that you know how to use Docker. But basically, so a quick explanation that in Docker you can. Where is my browser? Here is my browser. Okay. So for Docker, you can define whatever container you would like to run in. For example, you could say you want to run on Fedora, let's say. So you want to run on something that looks like Fedora, okay, basically. And then after it, you can say what version of Fedora you would like. So let's say Fedora :35, and then it's the Fedora version 35. Or you could get some very specific Docker container, let's say something that already has Perl in it, okay, and then you would say you use the image which is called Perl : and then one of these tags, okay, let's say 5.36.0, and then it will give you a Docker container in which you can which you already have Perl installed. Okay, that's basically, and then you have all kind of versions of this, depending on what is the underlying, not the operating system, the underlying Linux distribution, because at the end they are almost always Linux underneath. Okay, so this is, I don't know, Bullseye. I think it's one of the releases of Debian, I think. So this says it's using the Bullseye, and this one uses Buster, which I think is another release of Debian. Okay, so you can have Perl 5.36 on Buster or on Bullseye. Okay, depending on what your preference. And you can also have, if I search for PostgreSQL, you can also have an image a Docker image that PostgreSQL I don't know. I'm not searching for it correctly. PostgreSQL. Let's search this one. Okay, here it is. Postgres, because it's just called Postgres, not PostgreSQL. Okay, so you can say you can pick a Docker image that has runs that already has Postgres installed, and then you don't have to think how to install Postgres and just some configuration. Okay, and so that's what we are going to. That's what we are using here. But any questions here?
Yeah, just context really. So is that saying that we're going to spin up our own code on Ubuntu and then we're going to connect it to another Ubuntu container, or is it saying launch that container on our Ubuntu as the host?
No. So okay. So what happens? Okay. So what happens here is that we have an Ubuntu virtual machine. This one, this line, and on top of it there is, in this case, an Ubuntu container, an Ubuntu image.
So
here,
on the same,
if you say Redis, so you have to run it on something.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, but I was wondering whether it was going to stand up a container that was not inside our Ubuntu, or just sort of connected to it, networking purposes.
No, this is running on top of this one.
Cool.
Okay, so this container runs on top of this one. So you could say Redis, and then it would run the Redis on it, but that's not really that interesting usually. So here I'm just using some plain Ubuntu. If you had a Perl project, then you would probably say here Perl 36.1, whatever, okay? Because you already would like to use that image, maybe, okay? And then here is your code, your actual code. So you say, okay, check out my source code. And then, because it's an Ubuntu image, use apt-get to install some stuff. Specifically, I installed the PostgreSQL client, because this is only demoing how to use the client. Okay, obviously, if it is a Perl script, you would install the dbdpg, I guess. Okay, so the Postgres driver, the Perl driver for Postgres, you would install. But because here I'm only demoing how to use the Postgres client, so that's what I'm installing. And then I only ping it so I can show that I have network connectivity to the Postgres server. And then here I'm running some PSQL commands against that Postgres server that I have. Okay, so this is just to show that it works.
I'm just a bit lost.
How do I set up?
Sorry, I'm just a bit lost. I'm a bit lost here. I lost track of what's going on in terms of.
Okay. Let me start from the other direction. Maybe that helps. Or did you want to ask something?
Well, I'll tell you what my problem is. Okay, so you kicked off the container with Ubuntu in, and now you're doing stuff like apt-get update and stuff, but I'm not sure whether you're doing that in the container or in the actual host.
Oh, so everything. Okay, so here, if we are using a container, then everything that I tell it is inside the container.
Okay.
Okay, so it's confusing that both are Ubuntu, but everything is inside the container. Once you have a container, that every command you do is inside that container. Okay. But maybe I should have started in the opposite direction. So we need, in order to run our tests, we need a database server. So the way I can do this, I can tell here inside the job that I need services. I can have several services. One of them I'm going to call Postgres because, well, obviously because it's going to be Postgres, but that's just a name. I could call it anything here. Okay, so I could call it Kukuriku. Misspelled Kukuriku. Okay, so I could call it Kukuriku. Okay, whatever I'd like. Okay, and I'm telling what image to use there. So here I'm saying, and then now this is where it comes, this image. So we went image, Postgres, and then the number. Okay, so here you can say run Postgres, what was the number? 15.1. And then this will start a Postgres container based on this image. Well, except of the specific version, I use a list here from the matrix and started with the latest. So the latest label is, well, the latest usually of the images. And so here, I guess it's here, latest. You can see. I can be very specific which version of Postgres I would like, but I can also say, oh, just use the latest. And usually you would like both a specific version and maybe also the latest, just to make sure that your code also runs on the latest.
So when we've used that tag services, does that imply that anything we list in the services each gets their own container? Is that what we're saying there?
Exactly.
Right, cool. Yeah.
So you can set up various services, and you have one where your code actually runs.
Somewhere eventually. Right.
Okay. So this is just a service that provides you Postgres database. And you need to configure these things because that's how the Docker works. So first of all, you have to give it a username, some kind of a password. Of course, it doesn't really matter because the only client that can access this server is the one that runs here. So it doesn't really matter that the secret, it's not that secret here. Okay. So you just define, so the connection must be that whatever you define here, your code here needs to know about it. Okay. So here I set up an environment variable, Postgres user. So these variables need to be. I also have to set up these options. Magic values I read from the documentation on GitHub on here. Okay, I think here, either here or in the documentation of GitHub Actions. Okay, so this is how I set up a container on GitHub Actions that runs Postgres. And the same way, I have examples for Redis and Solar, I think. But, well, you can do anything there. And here is your code. And your code is, or our code is, I'm checking it out because this is my source code. Running this apt-get installs inside the container that I have. And then first I prove to myself at least that I have network access to this Postgres server. And now this name Postgres is the same as this service. So that's where it's important. So this is how these two containers know about each other. Here I gave it a name, and here I can use that name as the network name of that computer container. So
did you have to deploy our code into the container, or could you put it natively on Ubuntu latest, is it because of the network name? That's what gives you the.
Okay, so theoretically, or so according to the documentation, you can do either way. Okay, my example, I played with the other one. It didn't work for me. I guess I need to play a little bit more to make it work. But when they are both in containers, that works quite easily. Okay, but actually, I spent a lot of time because I was trying to do it without a container, and it needs some other configuration, probably just some flag somewhere. Okay, but actually, it's good that it's a container, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't matter. Does it matter?
No. I just wanted to know if that's done for a reason, but that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So the only reason it matters, actually, that now that's thought about this, is that this way we can basically only use Linux, because those are the containers. Though there are Windows containers as well, and I don't know if they are supported here or not. But this is sort of the limitation of using containers. I think that they are only need to be some kind of Linux. Here, okay, here. Why I'm saying here? Because these things, Ubuntu latest, Windows latest, and Mac OS latest, these are called runners, okay? So in the world of GitHub, but it's also the same in GitLab, you have these virtual machines or machines that are called runners. And on these runners, you can run either natively or you can run a container on them. And GitHub gives us these three types of runners, but you can actually set up your own runner. So I think, I don't know where, I haven't tried it in, so in the GitHub world, I haven't tried it. In GitLab, I did it a couple of times already. What happened in GitLab is that I set up a machine once in DigitalOcean, once in Azure. So anywhere basically with a network access, you can set up a machine, you install their agent, you make some configuration, and from that point, you can use that machine instead of this Ubuntu latest. So let's say you would like to run your stuff on FreeBSD, and you would like to make sure that your test runs on FreeBSD. So you can set up a machine somewhere running FreeBSD, install their agent, and then, assuming they have an agent for FreeBSD, of course, okay, and then here you do some configuration to use that agent, to run that runner, okay, to execute your code. But basically, you are free to run anything. And I think then, in that case, you probably, the time limitation or the cost of the time is different, because basically they are charging for you the runtime of their runners, because that's what they really costs them money. So if you're using your own machine, then probably that doesn't cost you the minutes that I mentioned. So anyway, this is an example, and I put the link is there in the notes. Okay, whatever. I'll check why it's here, why it's not committed. Okay, so this is an example for Postgres. Redis, it's almost the same. Here you can see that I have a list of Redis versions. I guess for Postgres, I will have to also do it. And this is how I set up Redis. That's it. It's simpler. Postgres had all these variable names and whatever. So this is how I set up a service for Redis. And I called it Redis, and therefore I can access it as Redis. Okay, but maybe you would have, maybe you have some code that has two Redis servers and the Postgres. Okay, so you can set up one service called Redis 1, another one called Redis 2, and the third service called Postgres. And then from your code, you can access all three of them. And of course, it's not limited to images that are public. You can, that this image, the service, can be some private image you host somewhere. You just have to give the proper authorization to it. So one thing that you could do, if you have a complex application, okay, that uses a Postgres server, a Redis server, and itself has, let's say, 3 microservices. And now you would like that these are all your code. Okay, so you have 3 microservices that are all 3 of them are your code. And besides that, you have these databases. So you set up services, one service for Postgres, one service for Redis, and maybe one service with one of these microservices, and another service with a second of these microservices. And maybe the third one is what actually you're testing now, while they are connected to the other two. So basically, you can set up all your system here. Well, more or less, I guess. There are various things that are harder to set up, like firewalls and I don't know. But you can imitate a lot from your system and have this complex setup. So I'm trying to think if I have some of these that I can show.
All this stuff is only going to persist for the length of your testing. I like to think you could probably find alternate ways of testing rather than deploying the entire stack all the time. But
yeah, so that's sort of the drawback and the advantage that is just like you set up everything and then it's gone. Okay.
Well, it's there for as long as you want to pay for it, I suppose.
Yes, yes. So if you need some persistent database that you don't want to all the time shut down and well, first of all, I think for a test I would try to shut down, and I mean for most of the tests I wouldn't need all the data, so I need a really small set of data for most of the tests. There might be tests, load tests and whatever, that you need a lot of data, and maybe that's not good for that. Okay, but for the functional test you usually only need a small subset of your data, just specific types of data, and then it's usually quite easy to set up a database and fill that data and run the tests. Okay, but you can access from this code, you can access any public server, and with the proper access, I guess you can also have any private server. So you can set up your database somewhere and then access it. Okay, so I was planning on I showed a little bit of the slides, one, maybe two, then the examples here that you have the links here. What time is it? 40. Well, I wanted to show you some other stuff, and okay. Let me try to show this one, and then so the goal was the goal was that by the end of this meeting you will be able to set up your own GitHub action and start selling pull requests to these Perl projects. But maybe that's we are not yet there yet. We have to practice it a little bit. So let's try to do something else here, and I still need to find my browser. So I mentioned, right, that some repositories here, some repositories have link to some cPanel modules have linked to their source code, to their repository, and to the issues. Okay, but not all of them. If we go to cPanel Digger, here you can see the ones that have a link to their GitHub repository and the ones that don't. And the ones that have linked to their GitHub repository, but not to their bug tracker. Okay, so if I visit this specifically project, then here you will see a link to the repository. And the link to the issue is the default link to RT. So if I don't know if you can see at the bottom, it links to RT. I click on it to show you. RT is the old bug tracking system used by default every Perl project. So, and it's fine. Some people like to use that, but my I think that if you don't have it explicitly, then it probably means that you didn't think that you would like to, didn't decide, or didn't know that you have to, that's better to say explicitly, okay? Or maybe you didn't think that this is going to be the default. So if you go to this project, to the GitHub of this project, it has issues open. In GitHub, you could actually tell that you don't want issues. Okay, you could configure your project to say that, okay, don't allow people opening issues, because for example, you're handling your issues in RT, okay? But obviously in this case, the issues are still there or open. So the person who wrote didn't turn it off, but the link, but the website, MetaCPAN links to RT. So it just leads to confusion and leads to some people opening issues here, some opening there. So it would be better to set up this, to configure this. And how can you do this? Well, the link here, if you click on it, leads to an article I wrote a while ago explaining exactly how to do that, whether it's depending on what packaging system used by that CPAN module. So there are basically 4 packaging systems. One of them is executable SmakeMaker, module build, which is not that used anymore, module install, and this Zilla. And probably there are some others, or these are the main ones. And for each one of them, here you can see in the Makefile PL, you need to add this code to have links to GitHub and to link to the bug tracker. So if we go to this source code, well, this one is using this Zilla. Okay, that slide differently. So let's go here. This Zilla, this is what you need. Meta resources and this one, or this way. And for some reason, this doesn't link to it. So at this point, I would do, the minimum thing I would do is go to this issue and open an issue and tell the person, well, this link is missing and it's now confusing whether you would like to have it in issues, which is open now, or in RT, and it would be better to explicitly link to it. Of course, if you know this Zilla, then you can also send a pull request. So it will configure, change this INI file. I don't know it well enough to have the link, have that link as well. Let's go back to CPAN. Okay, so that's one of the, here's another one. Okay, let's see this one. This is also Destiny. This one, I'm trying to find one that I actually know. This is also Destiny. So I hardly know this Zilla, so that's why I don't know what exactly is missing. Okay, so that's one. Let's try this. Oh, it's a Makefile. Okay. So here, you see it says meta merge, it says resources, repository. But if you look at my article, it says it can also have bug tracker and homepage. So this is basically what you would like to add to the source code of this project. So let's try to do it quickly. Let's see how it can be done. I come here. What time is it? Oh, we have some time more. So, well, you can edit the whole thing on the website, of course. But let's try. Okay, so I'm cloning that repository. and I'm going into that thing. And I see it has a make-file. Okay, I saw it earlier. And so the standard thing is run makefile, Perl makefile. Well, it needs a bunch of things to install. Wow, horror. This will install all the dependencies. I tell cPanel not to run the tests to make it faster. Usually, I run this all this inside a Docker container to protect myself, but now I'm just trying to do it more quickly. Okay, whatever, now it's even failing. So in this case, I would start, okay, trying to understand why is it failing. And maybe there are instructions what else to install. Yeah, okay, see? Stuff to install before, okay. Anyway, make this there. Okay, this will create the folder with all the files that is going to go into the distribution. And here you have a meta file, two meta files, a JSON and a YAML. And here is the information, right? So what happens is that when the person who releases a distribution runs these commands, from the makefile PL, this meta file is generated. And you see, the repository is there, but not the bug tracker. So what I need to do is, I'm removing this now. I don't need this. I need to edit this file. Come here, okay. Go to my cheat sheet. Copy this one. And fix it. Issues, okay, so. Okay, so this is leading to their issues. Now I run makefile PL again. And I run this, make this dir again. Open the JSON file. And now it's here. You see this line. So if this change is accepted, well, if I send the pull request and if the change is accepted, then in the next release of this module, the extra link will be added to the meta JSON file. And from there, meta cpan will be able to display it. So this is a rather simple change, right? So now what I would do is git checkout -b create a branch, okay? Because I would like to work on branches. So I called it issues. Git status. This is the file I changed. So git add and git commit add link to issues to meta files. So there's a JSON file and the YAML file. For historical reasons, there are two, doesn't really matter. Then they're both generated. Okay, so I committed this. Now I need to push it out, right? But I can't just push out, right? Because I don't have, first of all, because I'm not this branch is not mapped, but it's also because I don't own the repository. So if I git remote, I don't have access, write access to this repository. So what I need to do, this is the repository, right? I need to fork it, create a fork. It is thinking about it. Okay, so now I have a fork. So a copy of the repository in my account. So it's now subgub and the name of this project. And I can add git remote add, and I call it fork. And I put the link here. So I say, I'm adding another remote. So my code is going to, my local repository is going to be mapped to 2 remote repositories. Before I do that, let me show you something. There is this configuration file in .git. This is basically, these 3 lines are basically the mapping to the origin repository. Nothing else, just these 3 lines. So when I run this extra and I look at the file, you will see that now it added this one. So now I have a mapping of 2 remotes. And I can see them both. Well, actually, there are one for the fetching and one for pushing. So in each case. So now I can push out my source code, my branch to my own repository. Git, again, I just type in git push. So I get the, it's now easy because it tells me what to do. Except that I don't want to push to origin, and I can't, right? Because origin is the origin, but it's not, I don't have write access. So instead of that, I push it out to the fork repository, and outside I'm going to call it issues. So that's it. Now it pushed out, and it already shows me that I can create a pull request from this one. Okay, so as I pushed out the code, it already said, oh, you have a pull request. I mean, you can make a pull request. Because the author still doesn't know about this, this change. So now I can come here and say, compare and send a pull request. And that's it. Okay, so obviously, or not obviously, well, actually, no. So I wanted to say that before I send this kind of pull request, I might want to ask the author if they want to use the GitHub issues or RT, and based on that, send this pull request. But now looking at it, they already have 35 issues opened here. So it's quite obvious that they are using these issues. So now I just sent in this pull request. And maybe they will accept it. And that's part of the problem with this, well, with open source development in general, that you send a pull request and the author might not respond for ages. I just got a response for something I sent 10 years ago. Okay, so that's a sort of a drawback there. And that's why I'm trying at the beginning, at least, that you send me pull requests so I can respond to them easily. But so here is now the assignment. Go to cpan.org. Try to find something that has a version control, but doesn't have issues. Okay, so here I'm just listing this, I think 100 or so most recently uploaded modules. There are more on cpan, but I'm listing the most recently ones because, well, if someone has uploaded a new version, that's quite likely that they have just worked on the code, right? So they are more likely that they will accept something. If someone hasn't touched the code for 5 years, well, they won't change. They won't release a new version just to add the link, right? But people who are more active, it's more likely. Anyone wanted to ask a question? Someone? No. Okay.
Yeah, I got a question.
Okay.
If you've got a cpan repository, or whatever you want to call it, that's not on GitHub, you're kind of stuffed, aren't you?
Yeah. So, so most open source projects are on GitHub. I have some statistics here that out of those 97 that are listed here, I think it's the last, I don't know why 97, whatever. Out of these, 77 have, or 79% have a link to their version control system.
Yeah.
So 21% don't have a link. Now, why they don't have a link? It's either because they don't have a public version control, so they are not on GitHub, not on GitLab, not anywhere, or because they forgot to add the link. If they are not on any of these public version control, well, there are people who don't use public version control.
So I've got a interest in a cpan module that's basically not been touched for quite a few years, and there's essentially, because of Moose changes to Moose, it no longer works. There's an issue, not GitHub issue, raised on it, which essentially tells you how to fix it. And so what I'm doing at the moment is, every time we end up with a new release of Perl, we end up copying this and then basically monkey patching it to get it to work. And so we're doing that. But I quite like to, well, I've pestered the author a couple of times, but he never responds. I guess he's just not interested anymore, or not active, who knows.
So yeah.
And I don't quite know how to deal with it in a good way.
So okay. So look at the author, if the author has any other activities on Perl. If they are, then that's the more problematic one. If they haven't done anything, then you can conclude that they are not active at all or not in Perl, and then you can initiate a request to become the owner of that module and to be able to upload yourself. Okay. So that, and then you will start releasing new versions. Okay, once you get that right. So I can explain how to do that in a bit.
Okay.
But what you can also do, sorry?
I say perhaps not within, never mind, carry on, sorry.
Okay, so no, it's not a long explanation. I'll explain. A less, I don't know, demanding or less ambitious thing is to create a, is it on GitHub?
No.
No. So what I did for a couple of projects is I took their source code. It's not on GitHub. I put it on GitHub, cleaned up so none of the generated files are there, and started to maintain on GitHub. And even without releasing to cpan, because I said, okay, I make the changes and I make it public, and I put there explicitly that this was a copy of it. And and then at the same time, I started to talk to the person. If I can't talk to if I don't get response, then I asked the Pose author, the administrators of Pose. Pose is the where you upload cpan modules. And there is a mailing list where you can request to become co-author, co-maintainer of a module or maintainer, and then they will try to contact the author. And well, if you don't get approval, well, then you don't get approval. If I don't. So far, I think every time I asked, I got approval, either by the author, or if the author wasn't responding, then after a few weeks, they just give me the co-maintainer bit, and then I can start uploading new versions. Okay, but you can start it by just creating a copy of the. So I downloaded the zip file from cpan, unzipped it, added to Git, pushed it to GitHub, then removed all the generated files, like the meta.json, all these. So because they don't need to be in GitHub. And
yeah, okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do that.
So that's it. Any questions here?
No, just following that to its conclusion. Presumably, if Steve was unable to contact the author or whatever, and he did move it to GitHub, he could then change the name tiny bit and redeploy it to cpan and then start using that going forward, couldn't he? Ultimately,
yes, you can do as well. Yeah, you can do as well as this as well. Yeah, sure. But I mean, I would try to first, if the contact the author. If the author is not responding, then try to get the maintainership, because it's not probably you are not the only one who needs this.
Yeah.
If you are really the only one using this module, then to consider using something else. Okay?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. That's quite okay. That's a deep and interesting question.
Yeah. So yeah, of course. So here back to this the assignment. So try to find something that has a version control, but no issue, no link to issues, because that's sort of easier to fix. But also you can look at these ones where you don't even have version control, and try to find if I can actually find the source code of this on Git. And for example, this is I think I know this author, Kimoto. And this is I might even have sent a pull request already. So I clicked on the author's name now. Yeah, that's Yuki. Okay, so this person has many modules, and most of them I think have link. So you can pick some of the other ones, and this one has a link to GitHub. Okay, so now you know what is the name of the author. And I copied the name of the other module, and I'm looking for in this user. And here is the repository. Okay, so what I did is I went to the author and I said, okay, this project doesn't have a link, but maybe one of the others has. And so I went to one of them. And indeed, this one had a link. And sort of I assumed that the same person will have the repositories in the same place. And then I did the search. So again, and here I can select, well, I can say all GitHub, and it still finds this one because it's such a unique name, apparently. Yeah, that's one of his own projects. And then you can go and say, okay, here is the make file. And then you can add. You see, it's missing. All the places, all the skeleton is already there, just the links are missing. And you can start by opening an issue. Okay, so that's sort of easy. Okay, oh, hello, the links are missing from MetaCpan for this module. So you go to the issue and you open an issue. Okay. Then you can say, okay, I'm just trying to make sure that all the modules have links and whatever, because Gabor told me that, or whatever. So you can blame me on this one. And I was for some time I was doing quite a lot of these, and then slowly it's cleaning up things, and people get used to this, and okay, they always forget. So that, and anyway, But and then there are a couple of these no's where the person actually told me that they are not, either they don't have any public version control. But usually that's what they say, that they don't have any public version control. So I just, or in this case, so this person told me, I think that they don't have public version control. So I just marked them in the source code. So no one that I want or no one else will bother them with trying to get them to link to the public version control that they don't have. And in this case, this person I sent some pull requests to, well, this is CI already. So these are the 3 steps I would like you to start doing. Adding an issue where there's a version control already, adding the version control if you can find, and later on, we couldn't reach that now today, but we'll hopefully next week, start sending a pull request that sets up continuous integration for that project. Because you can easily contribute to an open source project without actually knowing any of the code by doing these. And having a CI, it's valuable because you get feedback much faster than waiting to release and CPAN testers and so on. Okay? Any questions before we finish today?
Nope, nothing to do there.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so try to do this. If you are unsure about something, talk to me in Slack. Okay, ask it, link to it, whatever. We can discuss in Slack. If you are worried, if you have prepared a pull request but you haven't sent it yet because you are, I don't know, you're not sure, then just make the changes, push it out, and then link to it. I mean, put the link in Slack, and then I can take a look at it and say and tell you, oh, it looks good, or how to improve it before you send the pull request, if you prefer. Okay. But also you can send pull requests as you like. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Please like the video on YouTube and follow the channel. And see you next week. And
Okay.
Please send your pull request and write the articles and add to the JSON files and so on. Okay, so we'll have a growing web page there.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.